Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2021 Kia Telluride, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the etrailer.com Universal Brake Controller Install Kit. These Tellurides, you know, people are using them to do a lot of different things. They're getting real popular. We're seeing a bunch of them here at the shop as of late, and it makes sense. You know, they're big, capable SUVs. So people are not only going to use them for accessories and things like that, but to pull some pretty big trailers around. And those big trailers, a lot of times, are going to have a 7-way round type connector, and they're also going to have brakes. And so this kit, what it's going to allow you to do is hook up to those 7-way round connectors, and it's going to give you the opportunity to hook up a brake controller. It's not going to come with a brake controller, but if you pick a brake controller up, this is going to provide you with the signals and things like that that you need to get it hooked up. So pretty convenient actually. So that's a 7-way round connector. You know, it's going to send all the signals back to that trailer and have, you know, so all the lights and everything else work. It's also going to have a 12-volt auxiliary power back here too, so we'll have 12 volts. So let's say maybe if you have a camper or a utility trailer with some batteries on it, if you wire everything up right, you know, you could potentially charge those batteries while you're towing it down the road. Something that I really like is the fact that it still maintains a 4-way flat trailer connector too. So you have both of them. If you happen to have another smaller trailer or something like that, it'll work out. And I actually just ran into this the other day. Back of the truck, it has a 7-way, and the trailer I was pulling had a 4-way, and I forgot the adapter. At home, and you know, I had to run back and make do. So having them both right here is really convenient. At the end of the day, if you're wanting to pull a trailer that has brakes and you need a brake controller, this is really going to be the best option. That way you can hook one up. And like we talked about, you kind of get a couple bonus things as well. You know, that 7-way round and that 4-way flat type connector. Now, keep in mind, in order to get this kit installed, you are going to need existing 4-way flat wiring. That's not really a big deal. We carry it here at eTrailer, and that wiring, it just utilizes a factory connector plug and just plugs right in. So about as simple as that gets. And if you do plan on using a brake controller, the one that I would probably recommend, there's a couple actually, the Red Arc Tow Pro Liberty and the Red Arc Tow Pro Elite. We have the Liberty installed on our Kia here today. It seems to work out real well. We've had good luck with both of those, so definitely ones I would check out and feel safe recommending. Now, as far as the installation is concerned with this, I'm not going to lie, it's time consuming. You know, it's not really confusing or anything like that. It's only a handful of wires, but it's just the fact you have to hook them all up and run them all the way up to the front and everything else. You know, definitely plan on taking the better part of an afternoon to get it done. But with that said, why don't we go ahead and knock it out together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the back of our Kia, and first thing you want to do is mount up your bracket. So this portion comes with the kit. So I did use what's called a no drill long bracket. That way I could secure the bracket to the hitch, and I put a bend in it. That way I could actually connect our 7-way round bracket to it. So with the bracket installed, we're going to take our 7-way connector harness here, feed everything through, and then we're just going to take the included hardware and get it secured. So you'll take a screw, and then on the back side of it, put a flat washer, a split lock washer, and a hex nut. So I'll go ahead and get all these started hand tight, and then I'll come back and snug them down. Now we can grab the 4-way end coming off of our mini harness here, and we need to plug this into the existing 4-pole wiring that we already had installed on our vehicle. Before we get that plugged in though, what I'm going to do is take some dielectric grease and just put a good coating on the threads, or I'm sorry, on the terminals. That way we'll be protected. You know, we won't get corrosion, things like that going on. So I'll give that a coating, and this is simply just going to plug right in. What I went ahead and done is just made a semi-permanent connection. I just wrapped the two ends up with some electrical tape and ran a zip tie around them. And now we can start to get these wires hooked up. So you're going to have a yellow wire, this one here. I taped that up out of the way. This is for your reverse light circuit. A lot of people aren't going to be using this. It's primarily if you have like if you're pulling a boat or something like that. But with that said, if you do need to use this, you'd simply just tap into your reverse light circuit. These two wires here we are going to be hooking up. The kit does come with these pre-attached butt connectors here, but I like to change them out for some heat shrink type ones. They just hold up better against corrosion. And what we're going to do to change those and get these hooked up is strip back the insulation there on the end of the wire and give it a good twist. Take our butt connector, slide it over the bare end, and crimp it down. So these are going to get hooked up to our duplex wiring. So we'll get a big bundle of wire. Looks like this. You can peel back some of this gray sheathing. That'll expose two wires underneath it. You strip those ends back. The black wire is going to get connected to our black wire here coming from our 7-way. So we'll plug that on in. Crimp down. The white wire is going to go to the blue wire from our 7-way. So get this one plugged on in as well. And once we have both of these crimped down, since they're heat shrink ends, we're going to come back with our heat source and seal them up. I could take this white wire here with the pre-attached ring terminal. This is going to need to get grounded to the body of our vehicle. So here's a nice thick piece of metal that should work out real well. I'm going to secure it using the self-tapping screw. So now we can run our gray wiring up to the front of our vehicle. Not really concerned with all this just yet. You know, we'll get everything hooked up, make sure it works, and then, you know, at the end we come back and make it pretty and zip tie it up and everything else. But with that said, just ran our gray wire up through here. Make sure to avoid any hot or moving parts, and you use some zip ties along the way to keep everything secure. So that gray wire is just going to run over our rear subframe. And then from there, I simply just kind of follow these lines, these factory lines. So run it along through here and just really continued on forward. Just routing it this way. And usually your best bet is to follow some factory type lines. You know, the factory ran them that way for a reason, so why not use their thought process? So I just continued along, and it runs up into the engine compartment. Now, it's pretty open there. I just jammed the wire up there, and I was actually able to open up the hood and kind of reach down and grab it. So now if we pop the hood in the engine compartment, right here is where our wire came up, and I zip tied it up there. And from that point, I got rid of the gray sheathing, so I separated the two wires. All right, we'll focus on the black wire first. So this one's just going to get routed over to here where I had these breakers mounted up. So when it comes to mounting up the breakers, this is a perfect spot for them. They're right next to the battery and out of the way. This one, where the black wire is going to go to, that's the 40 amp breaker, and the other breaker, you want to use the 20 amp. All right, so the black wire that comes right from our 7-way is going to get attached to the silver post. So you just strip it back and crimp on a small ring terminal, just how we did the butt connectors, except just with ring terminals. Put that over the silver post, tighten down the nut with a 3/8 socket. And then you're gonna take, you know, obviously we cut this wire to length here. You're gonna take whatever is left, or a piece of what's left. This is probably 16 inches maybe. Crimped on, small terminal, put it on the copper colored post over 40 amp breaker. And this is gonna get routed to our positive battery terminal. So I just eyeballed the length. We're actually not gonna hook it up right this second, but whenever we're ready to, it'll be all set up for us. With that said, let's move back to this other breaker. All right, so the 20 amp breaker, you're going to take what's left of that black wire. This is pretty much all I had left over here. This is maybe 18, 20 inches. So you're gonna take that small ring terminal, copper post of the 20 amp breaker. Again, this part will get connected to the positive battery terminal, so put the large ring terminal on there. Again, not gonna hook it up just a second. So we'll just kind of let it hang for now. All right, with that said, what we're gonna do is wherever you separated this wire, you know, the white wire, I folded it in half and, you know, gave one end about another foot of length and cut it in half. All right, so the longer piece of white wire, you're gonna connect that to the silver post here on our 20 amp breaker. And what I've done is just put a black mark on this wire just to help easily identify, because we're gonna have two white wires now that run inside the car. So by putting a small mark on both ends of the wire, you know, kind of separates it from the other one and makes it a little easier to identify. But with that said, what you're gonna do is take this wire and the one that comes right off from our duplex wiring, and this is gonna get routed inside. Okay, before I routed it down though, I did have to drill a small hole in the firewall and make a grommet, which we'll see in just a sec, but our wires ran right down through there where the grommet is that I put in place. With your universal brake controller install kit pretty much completely hooked up with the exception of the power wires right to the battery, you know, now we can focus on getting our brake controller connector plug hooked up. Once this is hooked up, then we'll go and put power to everything. I just don't like to have hot wires kind of bouncing around in here. But with that said, we'll start with the blue wire. The blue wire is going to get connected to the white wire here that we didn't put a mark on. This is the one that runs directly to the back of our 7-way. So you take the stripped end there, put it in the butt connector and crimp it down. Now with these, I'm just using the included ones. They're not heat shrink type connectors, and not really a huge deal since these are inside the vehicle. Corrosion and stuff won't really be an issue. And then we can take our black wire. This is going to be the 12-volt power that will power up the brake controller. So that's going to get connected to that wire. We'll do that the same exact way. And then what we're going to do is just crimp on a ring terminal to our ground wire there. We'll find a ground here in a moment that we can hook up to. And the red wire, here in a moment, we're also going to get that hooked up, but we'll just let it kind of hang for now. But now that we have our power supply and everything hooked up, let's go ahead, go back under the dash and get the wires hooked up to the battery. Back under the hood, we're going to hook up our wires to this stud here. I'm going to grab a 10mm socket and remove this nut. I'll see if the nut comes completely off. Sometimes they're designed not to come off all the way. This one did. If yours gets hung up real bad towards the very end, don't force it off. You can just cut slots in your ring terminals and put them on that way, but ours came right off, so chances are good yours will too. We're going to slide that over the stud, both of the ring terminals there, and simply just tighten it up back down. So now what we can do is hook up our red wire here from our brake controller plug. Now this red wire is going to get tapped into the factory brake signal output wire, all right, and that'll be underneath the dash and kind of way up along our brake pedal arm, so it's going to be hard to see how I'm going to do this. So I figured I'll just kind of go over the technique that I'm going to use to get this hooked up. So we'll pretend this green wire here is a factory brake signal wire. The way I'm going to hook these up is by using a quick splice, okay? So what you're going to do, we'll see those holes in there. Brake controller wire you're going to plug in, just push it through, and then the factory wire is going to slide in between like that. And then what you're going to do is take a pair of pliers and crimp down that metal tab there. And when you push that down, that's going to connect those two wires together and complete the, complete the connection. So now that we know how to do this, I'm going to crawl underneath the dash, get it hooked up, and I'll show you what wire I used and how it looks. So I got that wire hooked up. Let's go ahead and check it out. So just to kind of give you guys a reference point here, we're underneath the driver's side dashboard. And if you look at our brake pedal, essentially if you go straight up and kind of against the firewall, that's where our connection is going to be made. So here's the connection that we made. The wire that we're going to be working with, the factory one, is going to be green with a thin black stripe. And so I use that method that we talked about to pair those two wires together. If you want to double check to make sure you have the right wire, what you can do is take a test light and probe that wire there and push down on the brake pedal. Whenever you push down on the brake, if your test light gets power, you know that's the correct wire. You also want to make sure when you let off the brake that, of course, the test light turns off. So test light will go with the brake pedal when you push it down and let go of it. So that's one way you can double check to make sure you have the correct wire. So the last wire remaining is going to be the white wire that we hooked that ring terminal to. So this is going to be grounded to the body of our vehicle. Turns out that there's a couple empty studs against the firewall there, and so I just used one of those. I did have to find a nut, to put on there. We just had that laying around. You can go to your hardware store if you got one laying around. If not, you can always use a self-tapping screw and just screw it to the firewall. With that said, though, make sure you're not going to screw into something, behind the firewall, like the brake booster or wiring or anything like that. So just really take your time, make sure that you're in the clear before you screw into it. But with that said, now we can go ahead and focus on getting our brake controller mounted up. Now we go ahead and get our switch set up. So I'm choosing to mount ours in our fuse panel cover there. It's a really good spot, and then in the future, if you ever want to get rid of the brake controller or something like that, you can simply just replace this panel, and not have to worry about a big hole in our dash. But with that said, you're just going to drill out a couple small holes there that line up with the switch, put it in position. There's this plastic ring. You want to make sure that that little nipple there is pointing up in the 12 o'clock position, and then you're going to turn the knob all the way counterclockwise. Then you can take this knob and you want to make sure when you put it on that the 0 is facing that nipple there, so kind of just snaps on. That way it's clocked right. When you turn it all the way to the right, it'll end on 10, all the way to the left, it'll end on 0. So now that we have that set up, though, you're going to get a cable. Kind of looks like a phone cord a little bit. One end of it, I'm going to use a straight end. That's going to simply plug right into our switch there. Just kind of push a wire through. Then we can go underneath and mount up the actual brake controller and get it plugged in. So if you look, our Cord comes to the brake controller itself and plugs right into the back of it. The other side of the cable, you know, from all the wires that we hooked up, plugs into the brake controller as well. And then I just securely mounted it using some zip ties to that big fat bundle of wiring that runs right up through there. So it's really secure, it's not going to shift or go anywhere, and should provide us with a good mounting position. So now what's left to do is hook a trailer up to our 7-way at the back there. Make sure the brake controller is getting power, which I didn't hook up a trailer, I just used a test box that is simulating a trailer. And as you can see, we do indeed have some power here. We can see that the light is flashing from green to blue pretty steadily. And what that means is we have to calibrate this. So good news is calibration is easy. All you're gonna have to do is simply drive around town like you normally would. And after you make several stops with your brake pedal, this will eventually turn a solid color, indicating to us that it is indeed calibrated. Now, you don't have to have a trailer with you when you're doing this. You can have the trailer. You don't need to have it behind you. Kind of however you feel comfortable doing it. And once you're calibrated, you're all good to go. So now that we have everything hooked up, it's a good idea to test our wiring and whatnot. And, that way we know it's working properly. So with that said, we'll try our left turn signal, our right turn signal, our running lights. In the top right corner there, we have our 12-volt auxiliary power. And then we can test our brakes as well as a brake output signal as well. And that'll finish up our look at of the etrailer.com Universal Brake Controller Install Kit here on our 2021 Kia Telluride.